So we're starting with the next chapter today, that is about clustering. In the third edition of the textbook, it is the 10th chapter. Okay. Again, it's a Hand and Camber textbook you're supposed to refer for this chapter. So let us start with an introduction. As already we have discussed this during the introduction and the other chapters in the beginning. So cluster is nothing but a collection of data objects such that the objects which belong to one cluster would be similar to each other compared to the objects that are there in some other cluster or some other group. So we can also say it as a cluster. Clustering is a process of forming these kinds of clusters. So we need to find the similarities, because we want to group some objects are given to us and we are not aware of how many groups can be found because we don't have any, the labels of those classes or those objects. We need to look into the features, various features of those objects, and then we need to find out the objects that are similar, and then we are grouping those similar objects. So we are calling it as clustering. So it's also called as unsupervised learning. So why unsupervised learning? Because as I told you, there are no predefined classes. In other words, we do not have the class label with us, right? In case of classification, we call it as the supervised learning. Okay, classification is supervised learning, whereas clustering is unsupervised learning, because we are not having the class labels with us. We need to find the similarities, we need to look into the features, we need to analyze, and then we are supposed to group them. So hence it is unsupervised. It's called as learning by observation, right? We have the objects, we learn by observing them, observing the features. Whereas the supervised is called as learning by examples. We have the class label with us and we know the features of those class. So whenever a new example comes, new data comes, we can assign that to one of the existing classes. So it is called as learning by examples, whereas the clustering is learning by observation. So what are there are various applications of these clustering. It could be used as a standalone tool so that we can get some kind of insight into the data, how the data is distributed. Otherwise, it can also be used as a pre-processing step, and the result of this can be used as input to some other algorithms. So here we have mentioned some of the applications. You can see here there are multiple domains wherein this clustering is applied. So if you take the example of biology, you can have a taxonomy of the living things, because different things, so you can see different groups would be having their own characteristics, their own features. And then if you go for information retrieval, there are various documents on the web which are available. We can cluster them, maybe based on similar kind of keywords or the similar kind of content. There are various ways to document. Then marketing. If it is possible for us to see the various customers to which group they belong, or what are the kind of common features or similarity that we can observe in our customers, it helps the marketing persons to improve their sales, right? Suppose let us say that there is a company or there is a shop and there are various customers they are coming. So they would like to group or cluster their customers. Maybe there are some customers who come regularly and there are some customers who come rarely. So if we are able to get this kind of groups, so the regular customers, maybe we can offer them certain kinds of discount or some other schemes. Similarly, we know that there are certain customers, they are not regular. Maybe we can think, okay, why is that they are not regularly coming to our shop, right? So is there any problem with them, or can we do something else to attract those customers so that they become our regular customer? So these kinds of strategies based on these clustering could be developed. Then maybe say city planning. You want to plan for a new city or existing city only, you want to plan for certain buildings or certain infrastructure, right? So then you need to look into the existing environment. Similarly, say earthquake. There are certain places where earthquake happens again and again, certain places it is very safe, and certain places very rarely the earthquake happens. So if you are able to look into these environments associated with these different places, we can group them, right? These are the group of these are the places they are very safe from the earthquake, or these are the places they are prone to earthquake, and so on. So similarly, there are various applications, various domains where this clustering could be applied or used. So I told you in the beginning first slide that it can be used as a pre-processing tool. So regression, pre-processing for regression, or this algorithm called as PCA, principal component analysis, or classification, or association analysis. So for all these things, before doing this, if you're able to cluster the data and if you're able to get some kind of summary of the data, then that is very useful for these algorithms. Similarly, if you look into the images, we have various images, we want to process those images, right? So you can compress. Suppose if there are similar images or similar kind of information is there in the image, we can group them and then we can compress. How we are compressing? Because there are set of images which are exactly similar to each other. We can have one single image rather than having multiple, right? So we can use this compression in case of image processing, or finding k nearest neighbors. Suppose if there is one particular object and you want to find out the other objects which are nearer to this particular object, so we call them as the neighbor. So if they are similar to each other, or their features, some of the features are matching, we can form it as one single cluster. Or outlier detection. So when we form the clusters, there could be certain objects or the items that might not belong to any of the groups. It may not be possible for us to have few of the objects to be included in any of the clusters that we are forming. So that can be considered, those objects can be considered as the outliers. So it is possible to detect the outlier also by using this clustering. So how do you say whether the clusters, whatever we are formed, they are good or not? So if the clustering is a good, then I mean the method or the algorithm that we are using to form these clusters, if it is good, then they have to produce the high quality cluster. So if we say they're high quality clusters, then we need to look into two things. One is intra-class similarity, other one is inter-class similarity. So intra means the objects that are there within the same cluster or within the same group. So they should be cohesive, right? Similarly, inter-class, if I take any two objects from two different groups, then they should be different. They should not be similar to each other. So this should be high and this should be very low. So the quality, when we say these are the good quality clusters, then they depend upon the following. One is the similarity measures. There are various methods or various ways to find the similarity between various different objects. So depending upon the method, we might get different clusters. So though the data is same, if we apply the different algorithms or different methods on the same data, the clusters that are formed as output from these different algorithms might not be same. So it depends upon the method which we are using. Within that method also, what is the measure that we are using to find the similarity between various different objects, and then how are we going to implement it, and also its ability to discover some or maybe all the patterns that are hidden in a group of objects. So note that different clustering methods may generate a different clusterings on the same data set. That's what I was telling here, right? Though the data set is same, we are applying different method. There is method A, method B, method C. So output of A, B, C are completely different, though the data is same. Say for example, if I take the example of this particular class, okay? So if I want to group you, maybe say based on your native places, there are different number of clusters I can form. And if I ask you, you please give me the information regarding your habits, okay, or hobbies. So based on your hobbies, I can form different kinds of groups. Or I may ask you the information regarding, please give me the information regarding the various clubs in which you are interested or in which you are participating at MIT. So the clusters are different, right? So the number of students are same, the same set of students, but still depending upon the our requirement or the feature what we are using to form the cluster, the output is different. Similarly, the method which I use also matters. Just a pictorial representation of the cluster. So as I told you, right, this is the intra-cluster distance. This should be minimized. This is within a single group because we can see here, based on the colors we have formed, right? The shape and the size of these objects are almost same. Only thing is the color of these objects are different. So based on the colors, we are able to get 3 different clusters here. So this intra-cluster, that is the objects within the same cluster, this should be always minimized. And the intra-cluster, if we take the objects from 2 different clusters, they should be maximized. It cannot be minimized, right? If it is minimized, it means that the clustering is not done in a proper way. So intra is within the group and inter is across the groups. So what is not cluster analysis? Right, suppose if I say that based on your alphabets or your, right, I'm going to form a group. So we cannot call it as a cluster analysis because directly we can form a group, right? So simple segmentation. There is no complexity involved, or we are not analyzing different features. We are not measuring any kind of similarity between various objects. So because we are not doing all those things, we cannot call it as a cluster. Though the intention here is to group, but still because lack of various things, we cannot call this as the cluster analysis. Similarly, suppose let us say that you have a query. Groupings are a result of an external specification, right? So we want to group, then it could be the result of some external specification. There is certain specifications given. So based on this specification, I am grouping. Okay. So specifications are already given to me. I am not finding out any specification on my own by looking into the data. I am not observing the specifications from the data or for the data. It's already given, right? External specification is given and I'm grouping them. Suppose let us say that how many students are they belonging to section B, right? So I will ask you, okay, whether you belong to B, whether you belong to B, and then I might give the answer. So it's a simple query. Specification, what is given to me is the student should belong to the section B or section A. So based on that, I am grouping, okay? Then, so clustering is a grouping of objects based on the data here, okay? So, but actual clustering is what it involves. It involves we need to find the various features, okay, and then we need to use some kind of similarity measures to look into those features of various objects, and then we are forming a cluster. So we call it as a cluster. So whereas a simple query, we are going to get the result, we have a group or the cluster, it is not a cluster analysis. Similarly, supervised classification, already we have seen the classification chapter. We have the class label with us, right? So whenever the new example is coming, we are directly assigning to one of the existing classes. So it is not a clustering. Similarly, association analysis. If you are trying to analyze whether the objects are associated with each other or not, either locally or globally. So these are the things which cannot be called as the cluster analysis. So what are the requirements of clustering in data mining? So whenever we try to generate or come up with the methods for clustering, we need to keep these requirements in our mind. Of course, it may not be possible to fulfill or satisfy all these requirements, but yes, these are the requirements. They are required for clustering algorithm. So scalability. Suppose if I say that I have some method or some technique for clustering and it works in a good or better manner given small data set. And if I try to use the same method on a large database, then it may not work, right? It means there is no scalability into it. So actually what is required? Scalability is required. A method or the technique should work irrespective of whether the database is small or large. Then ability to deal with different types of attributes. I cannot say that, okay, my algorithm, it works only with respect to numerical data. Okay. It could be numerical, or within the numerical there are so many categories are there. So it should be possible for us to use any of the data type as the input. Maybe I can use graph as the input. There are different graphs, different images are there. I want to group them, isn't it? So I cannot restrict myself to basic kinds of the data types. Any kinds of attributes, it should be possible for the clustering to handle. Then discovery of clusters with arbitrary shape. So majority of the methods, they use some distance measure like say Euclidean distance. So if we use the Euclidean distance or the other thing similar to this, then the clusters what we are going to get are usually of spherical shape. But in reality, in a real database, we cannot say that the clusters always forms a spherical shape. It could be any arbitrary shape also. Minimal requirements, so domain knowledge. So everybody may not be good at everything, right? Or we may not be masters in all possible domains. It is not possible for a single person to have the domain knowledge of various areas. So if you are giving the inputs, so our output always depends on the input. Okay, suppose if I'm having some limited domain knowledge and if I'm not able to give the proper input, in that case it might affect my end result also. So the minimal requirement for domain knowledge, it should be actually it should be completely independent of this domain. Otherwise it should be minimal, it should not be maximal, or it should not be more. Then able to do it with noise and outlier. So real-time data, we know there are certain missing values, right? There are certain null values, or there are some errors while entering the data, maybe by human error or maybe the equipment malfunction. So various reasons are there why we can see the noise in our real data, and also possibility of outliers in the data. So this, it should be possible to handle these things, noise and the outliers. Then incremental clustering. So a database is given to me, I apply a method, I'm going to get a clustering, also using certain methods I evaluate my cluster, and I can conclude that yes, my method is working perfect, I'm having a good quality cluster. So tomorrow some new, because it's a real-time data, right? It is not a static. So tomorrow some new data comes. So what should I do? So should I add the new data to my, let us say that I'm considering 5 years of data, and then I'm able to get clusters using for those 5 years of data. So after 10 days, I'm going to get additional data pertaining to those 10 days. Then what am I supposed to do? Should I add those data belonging to these 10 days to that 5 years data and again start everything from the scratch? Or whatever the cluster I'm able to get using these for these 5 years duration of data, I can simply just add these 10 days data and I'm able to get new cluster without starting from the scratch. So it is called as the incremental clustering. Then insensitive to order of input. Suppose if I enter the data A, B, C, D, I may get a cluster as A, B and then C, D, two cluster. Suppose tomorrow if somebody else enters the data as B, A, D, C, then also they should get the same cluster. A, B as one cluster, C, D as another cluster. Okay. Just because the order of input is changed, a given method cannot give us two different clusters. Of course, if you're using the different methods or different criteria, we may get the different cluster for the same data. But here, for the same data, for the same feature, for the same method, just because we're altering the input, it should not give us the different kinds of results. Then high dimensionality. It is not that I cannot say, okay, I have an algorithm and it works only for two-dimensional data, maybe three-dimensional data. No. You study data warehouse, right? So in real-time data, it is very huge. So many dimensions are there. Maybe hundreds of thousands of dimensions are there, and it should be possible for us to handle the high dimensional data also. Then sometimes there could be certain constraint. Let us say that government comes up with a policy, okay, right? We need to build or we need to give the facility of ATM to all the people. Suppose if the constraint say that from one ATM to the other ATM, say suppose some 2 kilometer distance should be there, or within the 2 kilometer or 5 kilometer radius, there has to be only one ATM of a given bank. Okay, suppose some constraints like this are there. Let us say that there is one ATM. So what do? The rule says, okay, within 5 kilometers of range, there should not be another ATM. So what I'm supposed to do? So from one existing ATM, I need to see the radius of 5 kilometers. And then after 5 kilometers only, I need to install another ATM, right? Suppose in this process, after 5 kilometers, if I'm going, I'm getting some river there. Can I have an ATM on the river or inside the river? Definitely no, right? So just because this constraint is given, we cannot blindly follow the constraint. At the same time, we should also meet the given constraint as much as possible. So what are we supposed to do? Then we need to think, right? For example, in this example, suppose if there is an ATM, of course, I know that I cannot have ATM inside the river. Maybe I need to go a little bit distance away from the river, and then I can install the ATM, something like that. Then finally, interpretability. So we have the clusters with us. I'm giving you the clusters, the group of objects, and you are not able to interpret it. You are not able to understand those clusters. Then definitely it's of no use, isn't it? One should be able to understand, interpret the various clusters and then use it also. Otherwise, it's of no use. So these are all the important requirements for clustering. Of course, we do not have any method which satisfies or fulfills all these requirements. So what are the major clustering approaches? There are many approaches are there. The major ones are partitioning, hierarchical, and then density based. So partition is, the name itself is telling we are constructing and coming up with different partitions given a data. And then we try to evaluate that whether the cluster is good or not. So based on some criteria. For example, it could be minimize sum of square error. Okay, so various criteria would be there. We can use any of the criteria. The typical methods under these approaches are K-means, K-medoids, and Clarent. We would be discussing about these methods in the coming. Then hierarchical approach. So we are not a partition, we are partitioning in a hierarchical way, in a tree-like manner. And these are the examples of the algorithms which comes under this category. And we would be discussing about these two in brief, as per our syllabus I'm telling you, okay. Then the density-based approach. So wherever there are objects which are close together, there definitely that area would be dense. So then we can cluster them based on the density, and the methods which come under this approach are DBSCAN, OPTIS, and DENFLU, and we'll be looking into this DBSCAN. So density based, we'll be looking into DBSCAN, hierarchical, these two, and then partitioning, these three algorithms we would be looking into some detail. So the general characteristics of these methods is given here. So partitioning, it finds mutually exclusive clusters, and the shape of the clusters are usually spherical, and they are distance based. So the generally used decision method is the Euclidean one, and they may use mean or medoid or sometimes more to represent the cluster center. Then hierarchical, as we know, it is multiple levels. But here the main limitation is we cannot correct erroneous mergers or split. It means in a hierarchical dividing process, given an object, when we divide, suppose we may follow either top down or the bottom up approach. Okay, suppose let us say that I'm following the top down approach and I'm splitting certain data. Then again I need to say first step, there are data, complete data is there. I'm splitting the data into two groups. The next step, I take each of this group and I try to further divide this group. Okay, so when we are moving on like this, there is no way for us to go back. Suppose if that split, whatever we are doing in the first step itself goes wrong, then definitely it is going to affect the other splits at other levels also, but we cannot undo it. So we need to be careful. Then density based method. So these methods give us the arbitrary shaped cluster, whereas the partitioning gives only the spherical. Density gives arbitrary shaped clusters, because we are not using any kind of Euclidean distance or any such kinds of things here. Majorly we are looking into the regions which are dense, and based on that only we are trying to form the clusters. Hence arbitrary shaped clusters are formed using these density based method. And it also helps us to find the outliers if at all it is there, whereas that is difficult to find the outliers in these partitioning methods. So notion of cluster can be ambiguous. For example, if you look into the data, so how many clusters we can form? Either I can form these days one cluster, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? Or I may form this entire thing as one cluster. Here it is one cluster. I may form two cluster, or else I may, this is 1, 2, then 3 and 4 cluster. It depends how I'm looking at these objects, right? So whereas here it is very clear, we can form only two clusters because it is based on the shape as well as the color. We can see that, okay, this is one cluster and this is the other cluster. This is very clear here. Similarly, if you look into it, there are of different shapes and different colors. So it is possible for us to form 6 different clusters. And here we can see there are only 4 clusters. So we can see the data distribution is exactly similar to this. They are in the same place. Only thing is the shape and the color matter. So based on that we are deciding how many clusters can be formed. So it is, of course, it is a small data set, but in reality when we are having a very huge dimension, a large database, it is not a simple task to decide about the number of clusters. Okay, so let us look into these major partitioning approaches one by one. To begin with, partitioning algorithm. So given a database D with n number of objects, the task is come up with k number of clusters. We have a database and n number of objects belonging to that database. We are required to come up with k number of clusters such that the sum of square distance is minimal. This is also called as the objective function of this clustering method. What is the objective? We want to minimize these error. So what is this? So P, right? If there are k number of clusters, summation of I1 to k, P belongs to C. P can be any point. So for each point P belonging to this cluster, find out its different from its center point and then square this. Similarly, we repeat this for all the points, and if we sum, what we are going to get is sum of squared error, right? Sum of square. So we need to reduce or we need to minimize, that is the objective of this partitioning or the clustering method. So given k, find a partition of k clusters. So somebody is telling you, you come up with k number of clusters. K can be 3, K can be 4, K can be 10, it could be anything. So if you want to go for global optimum, then we need to partition the data exhaustively because we want to ensure the global optimal. It's a very time consuming process and it is not an efficient one. So usually we go for heuristic methods. And the examples which belong to these methods are k-means and k-medoid algorithm. Have you implemented k-means in DWDM lab? Is this over in DWDM lab?
No, ma'am. We did a priori
No?
and decision.
Okay, fine. Let us say k-means then. So given k, it means k is the input. Okay. So there are 4 steps. Partition objects into k non-empty subsets. Then, so what are we supposed to do? If you want to form the k non-empty subset, first is we compute what are called as the seed points. It means we are representing the clusters by their centers. Initially, we don't know, right, the exact centers because we have the complete data with us. So randomly, we select any of the data items as the centroid point. So it is called as the seed point. So compute seed points as the centroids of the clusters of the current partitioning. And then in the next steps, what we do is based on this random central point, we form the cluster. And then for each cluster, we find out its mean. And then again we recompute the distance of other objects with respect to this mean, and again we try to assign them to any one of the cluster. So assign each object to the cluster with the nearest seed point. Go back to step 2. This is the step 2, and so this we keep on repeating until there is no change. So it's called as iterative relocation technique, because iterative, again and again we are doing, again and again we are reallocating the same object, maybe in the same cluster, maybe some other cluster, we don't know, it depends upon the distance measure. So just look into this. So this is the initial data set. Input k is given as 2. So to begin with, we need to consider any 2 points and we are supposed to form 2 different clusters. Suppose let us say that we have formed these clusters like this. This is one cluster and this is the other cluster. Assume that okay, this could be one of the seed point and this may be another seed point. Suppose if I selected that, then I might have formed the clusters like this. Next, what I do is once I form a cluster, okay, I take the mean of all these. I'll be getting a new centroid for this cluster. So you can see this is a new cluster centroid. I'm updating the centroid. Initially, I might have selected this as centroid, but once I form a cluster, I need to update the centroid. Similarly, for this cluster also, you need to find this centroid, and this is the centroid point. So once we update this centroid, next what we're supposed to do is take each of the objects. For example, if I consider this object, I need to find the distance from this object to this centroid and also from here to here. That is, with respect to both the centroids, I need to find the distance from a given object. So in this case, the distance here is less compared to this distance. So I say that, okay, this object belongs to this cluster. This object belongs to the cluster represented by this centroid. Similarly, we need to find all the objects. You find the distance from these two. Whichever is closer, we are going to assign them. For example, here earlier this was belonging to this cluster. Now you can see after updating, the distance from here to here is less compared to here to here. So in the next
Excuse me,
iteration, you can see that this, yeah.
can you go a bit slow? It's a bit lag also.
Okay, fine. So I repeat. So this is the initial data set, okay, and the input given is 2. It means that we have been given this data set and we have asked to come up with 2 clusters. Fine. So the first step is we need to take randomly 2 points as the seed points. Now why 2 points? Because given input k is 2. It means we are supposed to form 2 clusters, isn't it? So let us assume that we have selected this point as one of the seed and this as the some other seed point. Okay. So based on these 2 seed points, we are able to get 2 clusters here. So this is one cluster and this is the another cluster. This is the starting point because we don't know the data. We have been given or we have been asked to form 2 clusters given this data. So randomly we are selecting any 2 points and then we are finding out the distance of all other objects with respect to these 2 seed points. So whichever point the objects are closer, we are assigning those points to that particular object. So here we are able to get this first cluster. Then in the second step or in the next iteration, we are supposed to update the, because I told you partitioning, it is based on the centroid concept. Clusters are represented by the center point of the clusters. So we need to find the center of this cluster, also center of this cluster. So for this cluster, the center is this one, indicated by the blue dot here, light blue. And for this cluster, if I find the center point, it comes somewhere here. Okay. So it means that we have updated our cluster centroids now. Initially, one was here, one was somewhere else. Okay. Now we are able to get the mean point. So these are the new cluster centroids. Next, what we're supposed to do is you take each of these objects in a given data set, all the objects one by one. For a given object, find its distance to both the cluster centroids. So whichever centroid the object is closer, that object is assigned to the cluster represented by that centroid. For example, if I consider this point, I need to find the distance from here to here and then another one is from this object to the other centroid. So as you can see clearly, this distance is more compared to this distance. So this is closer to this one compared to this, right? So we say that this object or this point belong to the cluster represented by this cluster centroid. Similarly, I'll consider the second point. I find the distance from here to here and this point to this centroid. Again, we can see this is closer to this. So assign this point to this cluster. Then consider this point here to here and this. So each data point, you find the distance with respect to two cluster centroids. And then accordingly, you assign the points to the cluster. That's why I told you in the previous slide, it is relocation. We are allocating the objects, reallocating the objects. In the considering, I mean in the next step or in each of the consecutive steps, the object might remain in the same cluster or it might move to some other cluster also. For example, here you can see, so this was one cluster, this was the another cluster. But in this step, if you consider this point and if you find the distance to both the centroids from this point, this is nearer to this compared to this, right? So what we do is we'll assign this point to this cluster and not this cluster. So you can see here now this point we have changed, indicating that this belongs to the cluster represented by this cluster centroid. And again here one more point, if you observe carefully, earlier this point was belonging to this cluster. But now in this step, this point is closer to this centroid, not this one, isn't it? So now this point belongs to this cluster. So hence you can see the changes here. Now this is one cluster, this is the another cluster. This is in the second step, we are getting this kind of cluster. Now we have new set of points here, and here also we have the new set of points. Again repeat the same thing. Again find the centroid of this cluster and the centroid of this cluster. You can see here now the centroid has been moved, right? So this is the new centroid here, and this one is the new centroid for this one. Earlier they were placed here and here. Now next step, when we update it, update means we need to find the mean point, the mean value of all these given points in the individual cluster. So now again same process repeats. Again consider all the objects, find the distance to both these centroids, and again assign. So you can say it's a kind of a loop, right? So how can we come out of this kind of loop? Either in the two successive iterations, the clusters what we are getting is same. It means we can stop now because there are no changes. Otherwise, the cluster centroids, the centroids might change, but the objects might not move from one cluster to the other cluster. That is the another criterion. Otherwise, if none of them are, sometimes what happens is, in a very rare case, in the two successive iterations, say for example, in one iteration, after 10 iteration, I'm getting a cluster, cluster 1 A, B, C, D, cluster 2 E, F, G, H. Then in the 11th iteration, I'm getting A, B, C, E, D, F, G, H. Again in the 12th, I'm getting A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. 13th, again I'm getting A, B, C, E, D, F, G, H. It means continuously two consecutive steps or iterations, we are getting similar kind of the cluster. So there is no point in continuing, isn't it? So then also we need to stop. Or in the worst case, if none of these criteria works out, we need to specify maximum number of iteration. If I say maximum can be 50. So before 50, if any one of these criteria are satisfied, I'm stopping my clustering process. Up to 50 I'm getting, after 50 iterations also I'm not able to stop. So because I'm saying maximum iteration is 50, I'm forced to stop my clustering process at the 50th iteration. So whatever is the result I'm getting at the 50th iteration, that will be my final cluster. So this is the algorithm. You can see the input is, as I told you, number of clusters, K is the number of clusters, and of course database we have to give as the input, isn't it? Without database not possible to cluster. So there are the two inputs, one is K, another one is the data set with the n number of objects. What is the output? Output is a set of K clusters. The method is first is arbitrarily choose K object. That's what I'm referring to, seed points or seed objects. Arbitrarily select K objects from D as initial cluster sent. So one thing you need to keep it in your mind is, in the beginning arbitrarily or randomly we are selecting K number of points as our initial centroids. But in the successive step, the centroids, whatever we are finding, they may or may not be our data points, right? For example, here you can see, these are the data points. But if I find the mean is coming here, and this is not at all my data point. This does not belong to the initial or original database, but still it is okay because we are taking the mean, right? So mean cannot be the one of the points. Sometimes coincidentally it may be same, but usually it may not be the same, but we don't worry because that algorithm is like that. We are finding the mean and form the initial cluster, and then assign each object to the cluster to which it is most similar or to which it is nearer. So based on the mean value. So once we do this for all the objects, then update the cluster means. Update means, as I shown in the previous slide, determine the mean value of all those objects belonging to the various clusters. So calculate the mean value of the objects for each cluster. So we are updating the mean. So again repeat. Now again reassign each object to the cluster. Why reassign? Because now we have the new cluster means. Okay. So we are going to reassign. Again we are going to get different clusters. Again find the mean of different cluster. Update the cluster mean. Again go back. So this we keep on repeating until there is no change. In the clusters that we are forming, either the cluster should be same or the centroid should be the same in two successive steps. Otherwise, the centroid is different, but the clusters are still the same. So they are the various conditions for us to stop. Otherwise, as I told you, worst case, we need to specify maximum number of iterations. So what is the strength of this k-means? So in terms of complexity, it is big O of T, K and N. N is, we know, number of objects because we have been given a database D with N number of objects. K is the number of clusters and T is the number of iterations. So if we compare this with the other partitioning algorithms, we can say this is more efficient or the better compared to these complexities. But the thing is, it often terminates at a local optimal. Why? Because it depends upon, also you need to remember that given the same data set, my initial point may be different, your initial point may be different. Or if 140 students are working on this algorithm, and we have a database of say 1000 objects, right? So, and if we are asked to form 3 clusters. Given 1000 objects, we are asked to form 3 clusters. We need to select 3 initial centroids initially. Is it not? So 140 members each, if we are doing on our own, each one of us may select different points, different 3 points as our initial centroid or the seed point. So each one of us might get different kinds of output. So it depends upon the initial seed point, and also the distance what we are measuring is with respect to the initial seed point, and then every time we are trying to update the centroid by calculating the mean. So it is difficult to achieve the global optimum. So it's applicable only to the continuous n-dimensional space. Of type categorical, then instead of mean, maybe we need to go in for using these modes as the for the purpose of updating the centroid. And need to specify k, that is the biggest problem. Because how do I know how many clusters I can form, right? For example, I told you if I want to form clusters of the students, and initially if I say that okay, form the cluster based on your native place or native or the state to which you belong. Initially I don't know my students are from how many states, they belong to how many different states. If I say K is 4 and there are students who belonging to 6 different states, then what happens? We have to form the 4 clusters. We cannot leave the students, right? Says for example, initially if I select one of the seed pointers, say Karnataka, then the other point maybe say some Maharashtra, other one could be some Delhi, right? Other one could be say some Madhya Pradesh. Okay, suppose this is the case, there may be students who maybe say reside in Kerala. So what about them? Because I'm telling you, we have to form 4 clusters, isn't it? So Kerala, if you compare Karnataka, Maharashtra, Delhi and Madhya Pradesh, it is nearer to Karnataka. So those students, they also belong to the group formed by the Karnataka. Okay. And suppose if I say number of clusters K is 5, then of course the Kerala, it could be a different cluster. So it depends upon the K. So initially, nobody would be knowing exactly how many clusters can be formed. We are just saying, okay, K, 4, 5, 10 or whatever it is. So that is the problem. Because if we know exact K, then definitely number of clusters what we form would be better, is it not? Otherwise, in a single cluster, there may be, it may not be pure. Pure in the sense, the cluster might have the objects of different groups also. But what are we saying? We are telling that we are forming a partitioning based on similarity. So they may not be 100% exact similar to each other, but still they have certain similarity. We are trying to form the groups. So need to specify K, that is the number of clusters in advance. Of course, there are so many variations of K-means existing, and there are different solutions people are given for this, but still there is a scope, right? I don't think anybody can come up with a, ideal condition or ideal method to decide upon this K. So what we do usually is we repeat the experiment for different kinds of seed points. Okay, and we try to find the sum of square error. So whichever the iterations or whichever the seed points gives us the less error, we consider them as our final cluster. Then sensitive to noisy data and outliers. Let us say now if I assume that okay, they are all, say this is red, blue, blue. Suppose if these are all the points, okay, you just ignore the text for the time being. Just concentrate on these bullets. Certain bullets are in blue color and certain are in color red. Okay, suppose if there is a point somewhere here or here, red. Okay, there is a red point here. Now we are considering the entire database to form the cluster, isn't it? Suppose if I say this is one of my seed point and this is the another seed point. So then what happens? This point is closer to this compared the distance from here to here. So what we do is we make this particular object to belong to this cluster represented by this blue because it is nearer to this. So though it is an outlier, it is not possible for us to determine its outlier, and we are making it to be a part of any one of the cluster. So it is sensitive to noisy data and outliers. Also, next step what happened? Next step we need to find the centroid, right? So you can see all the points are here and one of the points is here. And if I find the center or mean of these, it might come somewhere here. But if I ignore this outlier and if I consider only this point, then centroid may be here, isn't it? So this outlier has the capacity to pull the centroid point. Actual centroid point may be pulled towards the outlier or the noise wherever it is existing. So it is not suitable to discover cluster with the non-convex shapes because I told you we are using the distance as either Euclidean or Manhattan or similar kind of the distances measures we are using to find the similarity. So hence always we are going to get a spherical shaped clusters. Any doubts? Okay, if there are no questions, let me continue. Let us take one example. We have taken here two-dimensional data A1, A2, A3, then B1, B2, B3, C1, C2. So totally 8 points or the 8 data objects of 2 dimension is given here. And we're asked to form 3 clusters. So value of K is 3 here. And it's also given that use the Euclidean distance measure to find the similarity between these objects. It's also given that consider A1, B1 and C1 as the initial centroid points. Suppose if this is not given in the question, it is up to you. From this data, given data set, you can select any 3 points as your initial seed points. Fine. But suppose the question mentions you need to take this, it means you have to stick to these points only as the seed point. Fine. So here, so as per the algorithm, what are we supposed to do? The initial centroid point is 210, that is A1, then B1 is 5, 8 and C1 is 1, 2. We need to consider all these 8 points find their distance to these seed points and assign them to one of the cluster. Let us see. Hope you know what is Euclidean distance. I have given the formula here for the Euclidean distance. So you can see here, I have listed out all my 8 inputs. This is our entire database. And here I have given the initial seed points. It was A1, B1 and C1. Okay. Then I need to find the distance to these seed points from each of the objects. Suppose if I start with A1, of course the distance of A1 with A1 is always 0. So distance of A1 to B1 is 3.6 and A1 to C1 is 8.6. How am I getting this value? By using this Euclidean distance equation. Okay. That is square root of 2 minus 2 square plus 10 minus 10 square. So it gives me 0. Second is square root of 2 minus 5 square plus 10 minus 8 square. That gives me 3.6 and so on. So if you look into these values, this is A1. Of course, the least is 0. It means it belongs to this cluster 1. Now looking at this second point A2. So find the distance of this A2 with this 2, 10, 5, 8 and 1, 2. So distance between A2 and A1 is 5. A2 and B1 is 4.24. A2 and C1 is 3.16. Now if you compare these values, the least one is 3.16, isn't it? So we are saying this point A2 belongs to the cluster with the centroid 1, 2 and hence we are telling here A2 belongs to cluster 3. Okay, this is cluster 1, 2 and 3. So here this is the least value for A2. So hence A2 is assigned to third cluster. Then consider A3. Again repeat the process. Find the Euclidean distance from A3 to all these 3. And you can see here the least distance or the least value in this row is 5. Hence A3 is assigned to second cluster. Similarly, other points also depending upon the distance, whichever is the least distance to that cluster, we would be assigning the points, and this is our clusters that we are formed after first step. You can see here in the first cluster only one object A1 is there. Second clusters we have 5 objects and the third cluster we have 2 objects. If you want you can just note down this. And again while solving, maybe we can restrict ourselves to 2 points after the decimal, right? Instead of having this many numbers, maybe we can restrict ourselves to 2 numbers after decimal. So any doubts you can ask me. Anyone, if you doubt how I'm getting these values, and if you're not aware of this Euclidean distance, please don't hesitate. You can tell me, I can show you one calculation.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yeah.
Ma'am, from the paper point of view, how much do we have to do in this? As in, how would we have to show? We have to calculate all the values for
Yes,
every
of
equation.
course. Otherwise, how do you solve? How do you know? How do you come up with a final cluster? Given a point, you need to find its distance with respect to all the centroids. only then you can decide, right, to which cluster that point belongs to.
And then it will go up to some iterations, right?
Yeah. So yes, definitely we would be at, if at all we are giving, we would be giving in such a way that it should, again it depends upon the marks also. Depending upon the marks and the time, we give the data set such that it converges. Otherwise, we may specify repeat apply k-means for 4 iterations or 3 iterations. Something we'll specify. Okay. Yeah. And one more thing what I would like to tell you here is whenever I give any question, first thing is what I do is I'll sit, I'll take a paper, pen and I solve once. And I observe the time required for me to solve. Okay. And then I consider additional maybe 5 to 10 minutes for the students to solve. By considering this only, usually I set the paper. But again, if you're not studying regularly or if you're not solving the problems or the algorithm, directly you sit and solve, you may feel it's lengthy or it's a time consuming process, right? This I repeated many times earlier also. That's why I always ask you, right, to solve the algorithms on your own once. First time, yes, it takes more time. Second time when you solve, you can see yourself the time reduces. So at least 2 to 3 minimum problems if you solve, then definitely the speed would pick up, because first time you will not be in a comfortable position to solve because first time you're doing something, right? So please try everything, not only any subject for that matter, on your own once. And one more thing is we are in this virtual online world and we are not at all, we are almost, we are lost our habit of writing. One thing is it is going to affect our handwriting. Other thing is it is not possible for us to write fastly. Our hands won't move because it is not flexible. That's the reason I'm asking you maintain a notes and write down the points. You should and solve the problems after that class, and you can of course, right, come back to us if any doubts are there immediately after the next class or before the next class. And if you don't follow this, then you would end up with a confusion because we have so many methods, so many algorithms. It leads to confusion. So you need to, if you want to understand any algorithm, method or technique, you need to solve on your own once. Then you are able to understand. Then second time you can observe that the time taken by you to solve one problem and time taken by you to solve the another problem, definitely there will be a difference. And one more thing, I don't give any problem which is ready-made available on the net or which is given to your previous senior batches. So ready-made answers are not available. At least one student has to solve. Right? And also because it is online, the time also we have to see. Suppose if I say that it is 3 hours exam, at least one single student, if he or she wants to answer on his or her own, then it is going to take minimum 2.5 hours. So somebody is waiting for the answers from then. It means what I'm trying to tell is you want to help your friends in unethical manners, then it is difficult because you yourself going to take time to answer. Without you completing answer, you cannot help your friends, isn't it? You please go through again, textbook is also given to you, need to, it's a, your 6th semester students, so make a habit, practice of reading the textbook once, because in a single class we are not covering much, small portion only we are covering. So open the textbook, read the textbook once, you'll understand in a better way, and then you solve the problem or the algorithm, whatever it is, and then you have doubts, you come back to the faculty. So it's a way of understanding, then only the learning happens. If you're not following these, you have your own means, you may get good grades or good marks or CGPA, whatever it is, but it is a temporary, right? In the long run for your future, definitely it is not going to help you. Okay, coming back to this. So you can see here, Cluster 1 we have A1, then cluster 2, these are the points, and cluster 3 we have 2. This is the first one, right? Initial seed points, we have formed these cluster. The next step what it says is update the cluster centroids. Update means now I need to find the mean value of all these clusters. So in the first cluster, since I have only 1 point, there is no change. So in the updated centroid also, the point will be 210 only because we have only 1. Show you here. So this is a new cluster. Cluster 1 it is 210. Then cluster 2. The mean of all these points, I'm getting 6, 6, right? So sum up all the x values of these points, divide by 5. Again, sum up all the y points, divide by 5. I'd be getting this centroid. Now you can see in the first step, the initial seed point for the cluster 2 was 5, 8. The updated one is 6, 6. Similarly, cluster 3 you can see earlier it was 1, 2 here. Now the updated one is 1.5, 3.5. So they are the new cluster centroid. They are the actually mean points, right? So 210 is the centroid of first cluster. Second cluster is represented by 6, 6, and the third cluster is represented by 1.5 and 3.5. Now, instead of these, now we need to change these to the newly updated one. Again, find the distance of all these with respect to these 3 points and observe the cluster, whether the clusters are same or not. Are you able to follow? Okay. So now you can see here 210, 6, 6, 1.5, 3.5. So 210, 6, 6, 1.5, 3.5, and these are all our points, right? A1, A2, A3, B1, B2, B3, C1, C2, same points are here. Again, use the Euclidean distance to find the distance of all the points with respect to the updated centroids, and the check for minimum value, the least value, assign the cluster. I think no need to take that because you can, this is just a simple calculations you can do later also. Okay, so same Euclidean distance I'm using here, and these are the clusters. So what are the new clusters? Now you can see earlier cluster 1 only A1 was there. Now C2 also has moved to this cluster 1. I'll just go back to previous slide once. So you can see here earlier C2 was belonging to the second cluster. Okay. Now after we updated our centroids, after we are able to find the distance with respect to the new centroids in the new clusters, you can see C2 has moved from second cluster to the first cluster. Okay. And the cluster 3 remains the same, and cluster 2, one object has moved to the cluster 1. Now we can see there is a change. It means again we need to repeat the process. So the new cluster center, again take these points, again find the centroid points. You can see that third cluster, it is not changed. Same points are there. Hence the mean also same as the previous one, 1.5 and 3.5, because the points remain same. Whereas these two cluster, it is not same. So you can see there is slight change in the mean values of first and the second cluster. Fine. Second iteration, first iteration based on the seed point. Second iteration, using seed point, we got some clusters and we updated our cluster centroids by determining the mean value of each of the 3 clusters, and we repeated the process, and these are the clusters we are getting in our second iteration. Okay. And now these are our new centroid points: 3, 9.5, 6.5, 5.25 and 1.5 and 3.5. And see here 3, 9.5, 6.5, 5.25, 1.5 and 3.5. Fine. Again, you can see this is the same original database. Again, repeat the process. Find the distance of these points with respect to the new cluster centroids. Again, see to which clusters these points belong to and write down the clusters. Now again you can see we are able to observe the change here, isn't it? B1 was in cluster 2 earlier. Now B1 has become the part of cluster 1. So again there is a change. There is a movement of the objects from one cluster to the another cluster. It means again we need to repeat the process. Now you can see here this is the updated cluster centroids. So here it was 3, 9.5. Now it has changed to 3.66 and 9. Similarly, second centroid was 6.5 and 5.25. Now it has been updated to 7 and 4.33. However, the third one remains the same because the objects are same. So no new objects has been moved to cluster 3 and also the existing objects from the cluster 3 is not moved to any other cluster. So hence it remains the same. Let us do one more and check what is our answer. So again for the new centroids and the same old database, again take the Euclidean distance and find the distances and assign the clusters. Now what is that you are able to observe here? You are able to see that the clusters that we got in the previous step and this step are exactly similar. You can see the cluster centroid is different, okay, except the third one. Here 7, 4.33, here it is 3.66 and 9. And if I go back to my previous slide, you can see it is different, right? You can see this is the previous step centroid, this is the new centroid, but two consecutive steps, though the centroid has been changed, the cluster or the object remains the same. There is no change in the clusters formed. A1, B1, C2, A3, B2, B3, A2, C1. The cluster remains the same. So it means we have to stop now. Fine. So this is the end of this k-means. So we need to keep on repeating the process until there is no change in the clusters. Otherwise, what happens is sometimes it's very rare. Okay, suppose assume that if you are going to get exactly similar centroids, it means if the two centroids are same, then no need to continue because we know that centroids are same, the data also would belong to the same cluster, right? But centroid is changing little bit and the clusters remains the same. It means we need to stop here, and these are our final clusters. Is this clear? So it's the same step basically we are repeating. First thing is K is the input, database is the input. Select K number of points from the database randomly. Apply Euclidean distance. It may not be, it may be something else. So suppose if I say use the Manhattan distance, I use the Minkowski or whatever the distance we give, same distance you are supposed to use. Suppose the distance is not mentioned in the question, then you can say distance is not mentioned in the question. I'm assuming Manhattan and I'm solving, or I'm assuming Euclidean. So you can assume, but you need to explicitly write in your paper what is that you are assuming. Okay. So then find the distance of all the objects pertaining to the seed points, form the clusters. So for the initial clusters, find the mean, update the cluster centroid. Second step, repeat the process. That is, find the distance of all the objects in the database pertaining to the new cluster centroids, updated mean values. Again, form the clusters, observe the clusters, previous clusters and the second clusters. If they are not the same, again find the mean value, and so we need to basically keep on repeating the process until there is no change. I'll just go back and show the algorithm again. Right, you can see it. K is the input, database is D. So arbitrarily choose k objects as the initial cluster centers. In this example, it is A1, B1 and C1. Then assign each object to the cluster to which the object is most similar or nearer. Then update the cluster means. That's what we did, right? Cluster 1 had only point A1, cluster 3 had 2 points, and the cluster 2 had 5 points. So we updated the cluster means. And then again repeat. So reassign the object to the cluster centroid. So we have to keep on repeating the steps until there is no change. So you can try to solve on your own later. Now, it is simple, right? Method wise, step wise, it is very simple algorithm. The K-means algorithm is sensitive to outliers. As I told you, suppose because we are considering all the points and we are assigning the points to one or the other cluster. So if at all there are some outliers or some noisy data, we are making it to be a part of any one of the clusters. So this might affect the clusters or the final outcome that we are going to get from this particular method. So instead of that, they have proposed one more method that is called as k-medoids. So this is happening because we are taking the mean value, isn't it? And the outlier has the capacity to pull the mean value towards it. And because of it, the final outcome is going to be changed completely. So the medoid, the concept what it tells, instead of coming up with a mean, you select one of the object itself as the cluster centroid or the cluster, because what is the centroid or mean we are using it to represent a cluster, isn't it? There is a class, we have a class representative. We want to communicate something, we communicate with the CR, in turn CR is going to communicate to you, right? So the student, the CR is representing your class. Whatever the issues or the concerns you can communicate, right? That is the representation. So similarly here, the centroid or the cluster mean, it is a representation of the cluster, not an individual point, representing entire cluster. But the problem is because we are taking the mean value, and suppose if there is an outlier, in that case the outcome may not be a good one. So people, they proposed k-medoid. Medoid means one of the object itself is going to represent the cluster, not some mean value. So mean may not be the actual data value, right? The value that does not belong to the actual database. We have seen in the example some 3.6 is a 6 comma. They are not the part of our initial database because they are the mean values. So Medoid, what they do is they select one of the object itself as the cluster representative. For example, if these are the points, so this is one cluster. Suppose this is the other cluster. Again, the concept is exactly similar to the k-means. Okay. Initially, we need to consider two different seed points, find the distance and assign. In the next step, what we do is, instead of finding the mean value, one of the data itself is considered as the representative of the cluster, and that data we are calling it as the medoid. So consider these 6 points 1, 2, 3, 8, 9, 10 and 25. Apply the k-means. Of course, here you can take directly the difference, subtraction you can take to find the distance. No need to take Euclidean, right? So if I don't consider this 25, all right, the number of data are very less. I can see myself that given these 7 value, 25 is completely different from these. So I might consider this as noise and I may form 1, 2, 3 as one cluster, 8, 9, 10 as another cluster. Isn't it? That becomes very perfect. But unfortunately, real-time data, when we are having 10,000 lakhs of data, we cannot do this. It is not obvious for us to look and to decide. We cannot look into the data and we cannot decide upon the clusters. So we need to apply the clustering algorithm. It cannot be done manually, right? So apply k-means using k equal to 2. You can see for yourself. It depends upon your seed points. Now, suppose if I say 1 and 8 are the initial seed points, then what happens? 2 and 3, they are closer to 1. The difference, say if I say difference from 2 to 8 and 2 to 1, definitely it is less. So 2 belongs to center, I mean the cluster with the 1. 3 also belongs to this one. And 9 and 10 belongs to this 8. And 25, if I find the difference between 25 1 and 25 to 8, definitely the difference between 25 and 8 is less than the difference between 25 and 1. So 25 becomes the part of this cluster. So I'll be getting 1 2 3 as one cluster, 8 9 10 25 as the another cluster. Next what I do, I need to find the mean value, right? The mean of 1 2 3 is 2. Again I need to find the mean of 8 9 10 and 25. You can see what is the mean. Definitely it would be greater than 10, isn't it? Because 25 is a large number. This has the capacity to pull the mean towards its side. Okay, that is the problem with respect to the k-means. So try to modify the k-mean algorithm so that we are able to overcome this outliers or the noise problem. So we're trying to pick up the actual objects which are going to represent the cluster, not the mean value. Okay. So each of the remaining object assigned to the cluster to which this representative object is the most similar. So instead of calling it a centroid, instead of calling it, because we are not finding the mean value, we are using the one of the object itself as the object to represent the cluster. So we call it as the representative object. This is with respect to k-medoid algorithm I'm talking about. So we call it as the representative object. Okay. So the partitioning method is performed based on, again, the objective or the principle is to minimize the sum of dissimilarities between each of the object P and the corresponding representative object. So instead of using sum of squared error, here we are using absolute error criteria. Okay. So K means we were using Euclidean distance and the objective was to reduce sum of squared error. So here we are using absolute error criteria and the Manhattan distance and not the Euclidean distance. So this is the criteria. We need to reduce this error. So sum of absolute error of all the objects P with respect to the representative object. So the basis for this k-medoids is groups n objects into k clusters by minimizing this absolute error. So k-medoid clustering, we find representative object, the object which is capable of representing the clusters. So this representative objects also called as the medoid. So there are different algorithms based on this concept. One is called as the PAM, that is partitioning around medoids, proposed by these two. Then we have Clara and Clarus. Of course, apart from these three, we have other algorithms also. As part of syllabus, we would be discussing about these three algorithms. So I'll stop here today. I'll continue this on Thursday. If you have any doubts, you can ask me. Please go through Hannon Campbell. Okay, read whatever I have done in today's class and also try to solve. And also you can form your own numbers and you can try to solve it. You can take few values and you can try to solve them. See for yourself how the k-means is working. Earlier k-means was the part of DWDM lab. I don't know whether it's included for you or not, but from the clustering it was included to implement in the lab. So any doubts or clarifications? Okay, if there are no queries, let me stop the class here. So please go through this. Any doubts you can ask me, right? As I told you, I'll be logging in 15 minutes before to the class. You can come and you can ask me any doubt pertaining to today's class. So next class we would be continuing with the other algorithms. Okay. Okay, then thank you. You may leave the meet.